Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Curt 4-pole trailer wiring harness on a 2022 Hyundai Kona. And adding 4-pole trailer wiring harness is something that obviously you're going to want to do if you plan on pulling the trailer, but a lot of your other accessories that may have lights can also run off this function. So with that being said, it's a great complement to adding a hitch to your Kona because you're going to be able to get things to keep you safe and legal on your trailer, and that's going to include your running lights, turn signals, and brake lights, so you can let the people know behind you what you're intending to do as you're towing that trailer. Now, this kit is designed for the Hyundai Kona, and that means that it's going to be essentially plug and play. All of the taillight plugs are going to be an OEM style, so it does truly make it snap in, but you are going to be running a power wire up to the battery to get 12-volt power, so you'll have to do minor electrical work as far as some butt connectors and ring terminals, but you don't have to be a wiring expert because I'm going to walk you through it. Before we do that though, a few things that are going to be important on this wiring harness is going to be the fact that it's going to be protected. So a lot of times people worry that, well, if I put this in and I have some faulty electrical, is it going to fry anything in my vehicle? The answer is no, because it's module protected as well as inline fuse protected. So at the end of the day, this really is a fairly easy install to do, and you'll be able to have that light function with really no repercussions of potential issues on your vehicle. With that being said, I found that in the instruction manual, they have you try to plug into some OEM style plugs, well, on your turn signal. The problem with that is with a hitch in place, to reach up there and get that plug out is very difficult. If you have small arms, it's very possible. I ended up pulling the fascia off, and I'll show you how to do that. Don't let it deter you. This is a fairly easy install, but also if you don't have the time, the place, the tools, or even the want to do this, I totally understand, but definitely if you're going to pull that trailer, you need this. So if you need to find someone close to you to get it installed for you, you can reach out using our dealer locator and find someone in your area that you could drop your vehicle off and get that wiring installed and be out on the road in no time. For you DIYers that are going to be doing this yourself, I'm here to walk you through all the steps, and we'll have this installed in no time. So let's take a look at that. Now before we get our wiring installed, let's break it down. That way you have an idea of where everything's going to go, because right now it just looks like a rat's nest of wires, but breaking it down piece by piece, it's really not too bad. So starting off with our module, this is going to keep everything protected. That way if there's any backfeed from the trailer, it's going to make sure that it's not going to damage any of the factory wiring. So looking at what we have, the 4 wires are obviously going to be our 4-pole connection, and that's going to give you running lights, turn signals, and brake lights. But we need to tap into the taillights to be able to do that. So on our driver's side, and where our module will live is going to be over here, we have our yellow, brown, and red wires. And these simply tee into connections that are going to be located back here. So we are going to be pulling some of the interior panels out to gain access to those, and also feeding some through grommets, but shouldn't be too terrible to do. Going along with that, we have a white wire that's going to be similar length, and this is going to allow us to get either a self-tapping screw or find a factory mounting grounding spot. So that's why we have that ring terminal already attached. So again, this is going to be on the driver's side. Now, we tied into the driver's side rear tail light, but we also need to go to the passenger side. So that's where we have our green. This is obviously quite a bit longer, and that's so we can drape it through here and attach it to the passenger side tail light. And that just leaves us with 1 wire. And most of the work that's going to be involved in this installation is going to be taking the large spool of black wire, attaching it to this power wire, and running it up to the battery with a fuse holder in place, and that way we can get 12-volt power. We'll get to that point at some point, but first things first, let's start taking apart the interior to get everything plugged in. First things that we're going to take out and set aside are going to be our cargo cover. There's probably a foam tray as well. We'll set these aside. Next, we're going to take the scuff panel out, and you'll see that this overlaps our side plastic, so this kind of just keeps everything in place. So being able to pop this out means that we can pull the rest of the plastics in to gain access to plugs. And I'm using a trim panel tool. There's 2 plastic push pins that are located on the inside. You don't need a trim panel tool. You can use a flathead screwdriver. It will just simply pop out the center section, and that should release the entire plastic push button. It's going to look like that. And if you want to have a nice organized spot to keep all of the hardware that you remove, it'll just make reinstallation of everything a lot easier later on. So once those two are pulled out, the center panel just has a series of clips. So what I like to do is grab on the bottom and just pull directly up. You should hear a pop. Go to the other side. Once you have both of those, you can kind of just peel this back. There's a total of 4 of them, and now we can set this aside. Another thing that's going to be in the way of getting this plastic pulled back is going to be this cover that we have. So we'll get this popped out as well. And then with the Phillips head screwdriver, we have a screw that's here that was located under our scuff panel, one here and one here. So we'll get these removed. Now we can grab our plastic, and again, this is going to have clips just like that scuff panel. So it's really important to not pry too hard, because if you start to crease the plastic, those will be permanent marks that are on here that are going to be a lighter spot. So just take your time here and find where it's giving you resistance and pry right at that spot. So you don't have to pry this too far. If you want a little bit more working room, you can drop the seat down, and that is going to help a little bit here. But really, this should give us plenty of access to begin the plugging in of our harness. The plastic pulled back, we're going to find that we have white clips that are going to look like our brown, red, and white. And so we'll separate that. You just push it in on this tab. And then these just go in between. So we'll snap those in. And our first connection is done. Now, while we have this pulled back, you're going to go down, and in this corner, there's going to be a grommet. That's where we're going to be feeding quite a bit of stuff. So what we're going to start by doing is just pull this out. Should be a nice open spot down to where your hitch is probably located. And the things that I'm going to pass down are going to be, I'll peel this back a little bit, our yellow wire with those plugs, the black wire so we can route the power up, and also our 4-pole. So we'll take all of those and pass it through the grommet. I've fed down the plug, 4-pole, and that yellow plug with the harness on it. The black wire is fairly short, so if you wanted to take that spool of black wire, strip back the end and put the butt connector on and then feed it down, by all means you can do that. I should be able to get mine from underneath, so I am going to pass that down. But something that we're going to want to think of is that grommet needs to seat back up. And so you can cut a hole through the middle and try to feed those through. I've had pretty good luck with grommets of just cutting a slice on it and a small section, and that way you can feed the wires in that hole. It'll still go back in place, and then I'll go back with a little RTV silicone to seal that up. What we're going to do is get our module mounted up, and the flat shelf that's below where the grommet is located, I'm just going to be using double-sided adhesive that's included, and we're just going to stick that down so it's not rattling while driving around long term. And try to get the wires, you'll see I have these as close to that grommet as possible. That way you have plenty of wiring, you don't have to worry about running out of slack there. And so I'll get this stuck on there. Let's give it a nice press. And then something else that we're going to want to do is get our ground wire attached. And I tried to find a nice factory ground with a nut. Now, don't get me wrong, you could probably use one of these factory studs and put a nut on there, but they also include a self-tapping screw, and it'll be pretty easy to just drill that into here. So I'm going to grab that and get that mounted. And as far as getting this mounted, you could really go just about anywhere here. Just to keep it protected and out of the way, I am going to mount mine kind of in this area here. Just make sure there's nothing behind there, but pretty simple with your self-tapper. You're just going to want to get a nice clean shot, put pressure, and once it starts to zip in, you're really just going to make it tight enough to where that ring terminal is not going to spin around any more than that, and you run the risk of stripping out the threads that you just made. And if you need to, you can do a small pilot hole with a small drill bit to get it started, but normally your self-tappers, if you get a good shot on it, it'll start to draw in. And I'm just going to rotate my ring terminal down and then snug that up. Now we'll grab the green wire, and this is going to hide eventually underneath that scuff panel, and then we're going to want to pull off this side same way that we did the other one. So it's just those Phillips head screws. And there's going to be a similar grommet to where we're going to pass this down and eventually make that connection underneath. So just as we did before, pull this plastic back, cut that grommet, and drop this in. This underbody trim here is not necessary to remove on the driver's side, but it is going to give us a little bit more room to work in a spot that really is, well, those plugs are pretty well hidden. So they're tucked back, and when I reach up, it's roughly about here. It's on the back side of, I guess you would say, the bumper beam, and it's in with a plastic clip. So I'm going to push that clip or try to pry those out to where I can separate those connectors, and that way we can plug in our harness connector, and it's going to be very similar on the other side. So I'll get this popped out, and if I come up with any tips or tricks, I'll let you know. Ran into a little bit of a snag, and it's not that it's anything bad, it's just extremely tight to get your arm raised up because the plug is on the back side of this. And so in order to reach up there, I had my arm all kinds of contorted, and I could touch the plug, but I could never pull it off, and I could definitely not get another one snapped in place. There's just not enough room to do it. So I've resorted to removing the rear bumper, which seems difficult. It really isn't on this car, and it's gonna save you just a ton of frustration trying to get that plug in. If you do have small arms, you might be able to pull that off. It's gonna take some finger dexterity to pull it off though. And so what I've done is just remove that plastic underbody fender. Here is holding some of that on, but there's just a series of Phillips head screws along this inside plastic of the wheel well. You then need to remove the Phillips head screw that's located right on here. And once you take that off, it's actually very simple. You might want an extra set of hands. You would just pull back on the plastic, and it's just a series of clips, and just work your way up slowly. You may kind of want to wiggle it around to loosen those clips. And then at this point, it is snapped in. I'm going to pull this back, and I'll show you exactly where those plugs are and why I did this. And with that pulled back, that gives me easy access to our plug, because even having access to it, it is not an easy one to get removed. There's a tab on the bottom that I'm pressing, and we got that out. So the struggle is there's just no gap to get up here to pull that off. So you can try. I applaud your efforts for trying. I tried, then finally just resorted to taking this off. It's not in the instructions, but I'm here to tell you, as I'm snapping these plugs all together, this is by far easier to do than trying to reach it up there. And very simply, once you have that plug out, you're just going to connect the T's in between the two, and then since you have the rest of that fascia off, we're going to repeat that same process with our green wire, and we'll plug it in on our passenger side. And with those snapped in, I'm going to get our fascia popped back in place, and if you want to, you can reinstall the hardware. If you haven't already attached your black spool of power wire to the strip back the black wire, now's the time to do that. And something that I'd recommend is the butt connector that comes with the kit is a standard butt connector, and if you have that wiring up inside the vehicle, that's going to be perfectly fine. But if you have routed it outside, I would recommend picking up a heat shrink butt connector. That's really going to make it to where when we get this all crimped together and put a heat gun to it, it's going to cinch around the wire, creating a nice watertight seal, and that's going to, prolong the lifespan of that connection. So I'll crimp this down and heat that up. The next thing that we'll need to do is grab our 4-pole and route it to wherever you want to mount it. Traditionally, you'll see a lot of people using the safety chain loop and the dust cap to get that to hold in place. That's totally acceptable, but all the excess wire, we're going to want to zip tie that up on the hitch and away from the muffler. So you can get that however you want, and you can also add some wire loom in the process. So we'll get this zip tied up. I'm going to shrink down my butt connector on that black spool of wire. So I put some wire loom on our 4-pole just to kind of clean this up, and then zip tied that. Now going along with that, as you run over any of your excess wires underneath, zip tie those up so they're not going to be loose. And then the rest of the routing up to the battery is actually fairly easy on this vehicle. The first kind of hiccups that you'll need to do is just get this up and over the rear cross member. That way it's not going to make contact with anything that's moving or hot. And then from here, I just kind of went along where this fuel tank is, and this whole underbody panel on the side is pretty easy to access, and just loosen up the hardware. It's just some 10mm nuts, and when you pull that down, you can just tuck the wire in there, and when we go to put it back up, it's going to stay nice and protected. At some point, you do want to take that wire and make your way towards the middle as the tunnel of our firewall starts to be created. And from here, we're going to use a pull wire from up top. It's pretty open, so you can use a tape measure and just kind of run that down, zip tie up your wire or tape it on, and then we'll pull that up to the battery. But the main thing is get it in this underbody panel. That way you can really just be on the side of the car to run that wire and cover a good length of it. And we'll just pull up our power wire slack and make sure again that we're not going to make any contact with anything moving, like, you know, something like the drive shaft or you know, steering or anything along those lines. And we are going to have some extra here. That's totally fine. And what I like to do before cutting any of this is get our fuse holder in place. So this just adds a little bit more protection to make sure nothing's going to get fried by having a fuse in place. It is kind of pre-stripped. I'm going to make my own here. On one end, we're going to want to put the ring terminal. And we'll crimp this down. The other end is, again, pre-stripped. This is going to be attached to our power wire, and I have another one of those heat shrink butt connectors because we want to protect this connection long term. That's a nice, easy way to do it. But really the reason I put this on first is so I can get a nice clean run of exactly where I want my fuse holder to sit. So I can really start to, you know, come up with a plan as far as getting this all mounted up. And really, I think I have quite a few different options here. So what I'll do is I'm going to take off the nut here. Looks to be maybe a 12mm, and then we'll get our ring terminal attached. Now notice I don't have the fuse in place, and we're going to keep it that way so we don't have power going through there. Now something that's completely up to you is to get this to snap back down. You can kind of just press on it, but ideally you don't want to damage the wire. So if you wanted to make a small notch for this to sit in, you can absolutely do that. But from here, we're just going to figure out exactly where we want the power wire to splice into this. I'm going to just cut it right about here. And then we can strip back the end. And then with that heat shrink butt connector, we'll attach the power to our fuse holder. Now with our butt connector all heated up, now we can grab our fuse and put this in the fuse holder. And it's also a good chance to get this wire again zip tied up nice and clean in the engine bay to where the fuse holder is still accessible if you ever needed to change it out. I think this is going to be a good spot for us. I'm going to trim a little notch, zip tie this up, and from here that's really going to do it for the installation. But we want to make sure that it's working properly, and we want to go back and make sure that we put some RTV silicone on those grommets that we cut. So I'll get this all cleaned up and then we'll test our light function. Now we'll be testing our wiring with a 4-pole tester, and that way it's specific to the vehicle. But if you don't have a 4-pole tester, you can get one here at eTrailer, or you can just hook up to the trailer that you're going to be towing, assuming that all of those connections are good. And when running through, you're going to want to check the running lights, the left turn signal, right turn signal, and then also the brakes. So we've confirmed that it works, and as I mentioned before, those slits that we put on the grommets, we don't want water getting into the vehicle. So if you have RTV silicone, I recommend coating up that cut, making sure that it's going to be all sealed up. And when you're putting your plastics back on, this green wire that's going to go underneath that scuff panel, if you want to, you can just pull that slack. It will tuck under here, but we're going to pull the excess over and zip tie that up so it's not hanging down. It's going to be a nice clean look. And once you have all that done, that's officially going to do it for the installation of your 4-pole wiring on your Kona.